Hello, everybody. I'm Earl Lawrence coming to you from my office here at home as I'm the new host of Black New Vote. Welcome to this Milwaukee PBS Vote 2020 election preview. With just days left before the November 3rd election, we'll hear from some young African Americans who are working hard to get out the vote. We look at the highlights of the latest Marquette Law School poll. We hear from some voters from the so-called WOW counties. We talk to Journal Sentinel Washington Bureau Chief Craig Gilbert and Pastor Greg Lewis of Souls to the Polls. And we'll hear from Milwaukee Election Commission Executive Director Claire Woodall-Vogg, who was on the latest edition of Listen Milwaukee. We begin with a story produced by my colleague Alexandria Mack, who talked to some young African American voters.
For no fools, we won't let you run our schools. MPS, for no fools, we won't let you run our schools.
There's like a narrative that young people aren't engaged in politics, and I think in the process of the work that I do with LIT, I've learned that it's the other way around, that politics doesn't want to engage with young people.
Leaders Igniting Transformation is an organization that works to develop the next wave of young Black and brown political leaders.
You come to a point where, you can ask folks to participate in a system, but if there's no space for them to sit, then there's not much that they can do. But despite that challenge, I do see that young people are really passionate about holding leaders accountable, about pushing their issues that are important to them to the forefront of the conversation, regardless of whether they can vote or not.
Throughout summer 2020, we have seen young people pour into the streets demanding their seat at the table. Now, just a month shy from Election Day, the question is if those same young people will make their voices heard at the polls.
There's a connection that we can see through data and polling that when young people are engaged in activism and engaging with these issues like the unrest and protests this summer, that it's increasing their engagement with the political system. The Alliance for Youth Justice did a poll in June, and that found that the number one issue among young voters for this upcoming election was systemic racism and discrimination. And that number was even higher among Black and brown young people within that study.
For me, really, is police reform. That's one of the big things, mass incarceration. And then also just this whole idea of like this capitalistic structure that continues to keep people down. So when we talk about, low-income families, things like that, we want to see more. We want to see just revolutionary change in these positions.
The issues that are most pressing to me in this election, I haven't seen been brought up. All I have seen is the illusion that our promises will be met when Black people have visions. And like with my vision right now, what I see is like I don't see anyone talking about reparations, or I don't see anyone talking about the contradictions of capitalism, or I don't see anyone talking about liberation for Black people, or all the things that are structurally wrong with this society and every reason that we are oppressed. It's just the illusion that Black Lives Matter and we're with you.
According to a study at American University, younger Black Americans make up a key set of swing voters that could impact 2020, voting blue or not voting at all.
We recently did a study of our own, a poll of Wisconsin voters, and we found that among the young voting Black in that poll, that the number one concern that people had about the election was candidates that they're not excited about or don't like, right? So I think that's the answer, that a lot of people don't really have a desire to engage in options that aren't really going to serve them in the way that they should, right? And so there's definitely this narrative of the lesser of two evils, but in either regard, both sides of the aisle are failing young people and are failing people of color in the communities that we live in. And they're very serious about that standard being met. And I truly believe that it's because we recognize the way that it's threatening our future, right? Like, we are the closest to the effects of the decisions that we make today. right? Those are going to define our future. And so when, you're asking your government to do something that's going to protect your future or ensure your success later in life, that doesn't seem optional. That doesn't seem like a lot to ask, especially from a system that has continually done things to harm your future and to harm your success and hinder it.
Both of them historically have shown me that they can't provide anything for the black community. Like I did research on Biden. I seen how he helped pass the crime bills, or I seen how he helped in mass incarceration. I seen with Trump how he wanted those 5 black boys to be put to death, or I seen historically in this state of the world right now, and how he's a byproduct of this ill society. Like I seen through these 2 characters, they're just characters to me.
In a battleground state like Wisconsin, the youth vote could possibly flip the state from red to blue.
A study by Circle at Tufts University found that Wisconsin has the highest youth electoral significance index, which is just a really long way of saying that in Wisconsin, the youth vote is going to be most powerful in terms of, how it compares to the youth vote in other states.
There may be a lack of excitement for the candidates, but many young people of color are still planning to show their power at the polls, remembering the voices that are too often left out of elections.
I haven't really been influenced much by the candidates to go vote, but I'm voting for people who can't right now. So I'm voting for people who are, in jail. I'm voting for people, who will not have the health to get out and vote if they can, or, convicted felons who, have their voting rights taken away from them. So things like that, that's who I'm voting for right now. And for my ancestors too. If it's someone that I believe that the ancestors would leave behind, then I will go make that vote for them.
Milwaukee pastor Greg Lewis of Souls to the Polls has been working feverishly to get African Americans to the polls. Our Everett Marshburn caught up with him last week.
Souls to the Polls is an organization of inner city church pastors working with their congregations. Its mission is to organize a power block of voters through an alliance of inner city churches, and it hopes to bring 100,000 souls to the polls this November. We're joined now by its executive director, Reverend Greg Lewis. Reverend Lewis, most people think of Souls to the Polls as a group that helps senior citizens get to the polls on Election Day, but you do so much more than that. Let's talk about that in your 3-point strategy.
Yeah, we certainly do that because that's important. But we also give information. We help people register. We help people get those photo IDs. We help them with their absentee ballots. We even go to their homes to help them fill out the applications. We do all these things. We give them information about when, where, why, how, about the early voting sites. We talk about the voting day on November 3rd. We talk about making sure that things are proper when you do those absentee ballots. And a lot of us don't understand that when you do those absentee ballots on the outside of that envelope, you need to have witnesses. We had over 27,000 votes miscounted because that didn't happen. So we really have to get out the information. And we light up Milwaukee. We do yard signs, door hangers, billboards. And this year, we're even putting, 100 early voting banners on churches to just, wake up the community and make sure that they understand how important this is, and they understand that you can vote early from October 20th to November 1st. So we do a whole lot, and and I'm probably missing a few things, but we have so many things that have to happen for us to energize our community, because man, we're in critical condition. We in intensive care. We on life support. We on a breathing machine. It's code red, code blue. We have to do everything we can to energize our community to help themselves. We say, man, stop sitting around letting things happen to you. Man, let's make something happen for you. And on top of that, we don't just want to vote for candidates. We want to make sure that on November 4th, after November 3rd vote, that we build this block of voters so that we can control our local politics. So we have the leverage to advance agendas in our local communities.
So it's not just about this election, it's about beyond this election. You've even got a part of your platform that talks about getting people to become poll workers. Why is that important?
Well, because on April 7th, we had 5 voting polls available. People had to stand 2, 3, 4 hours outside in the cold, attracting COVID-19, if you will. We don't want that to happen again. So we want to have a safe place for people to vote, and we need people to man those stations. So that's why we have to have polling volunteers. We have to have poll volunteers to make sure that our community has a fair shake at having a voice.
You've also done a lot of outreach towards younger voters. Why is that?
Well, they're key. You know, they are really key, because if we don't get the younger voters to vote, they're most of our community. You know, we know that we're souls to the polls. We're an army of faith. The power of 100,000 souls to the polls. But we need 200,000. We need the community to join us. And that community is our young folks. They are the most important people in the world right now. If we get young folks to come out and vote, guess what happens? The nation will change and the world will change. Milwaukee is that important right now, and young people are that important, and they need to know it.
Okay, and if people want more information, how do they get it?
They can go to www.soulstothepollsmke.org. www.soulstothepollsmke.org.
Thank you very much, Reverend Lewis.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you for everything.
With November 3rd just around the corner, Milwaukee Election Commission Executive Director Claire Woodall-Vogg was on Listen Milwaukee last week.
I'm happy to tell voters they will never see anything like April 7th again, at least if the Milwaukee Election Commission has anything to do with it. The biggest difference is that we've had time. We've had time to recruit new poll workers who are not as high of risk for COVID-19. We've also had time to implement all the proper safety protocols with our health department, and time to make sure that we can open over 170 polling places on election day. So you should be expecting to vote at your normal polling place. We've only had a handful of changes, and you can always double check that information at our website, which is milwaukee.gov/election. And since April, we've also seen a huge continuing increase of absentee voting. So we don't expect a huge amount of congestion on election day, because over a third of our registered voters have already requested their mail-in ballot. So we are hopeful that voters will find a very different experience on November 3rd. April 7th was really a catastrophe of events that never should have occurred. We were really disappointed that our state legislature and state court systems, and then the U.S. Supreme Court all held that we had to have that in-person election right as COVID-19 was really surging, especially in the city of Milwaukee. But we have had plenty of time to prepare to conduct an election in a pandemic now.
And then just so far, everything's gone smoothly this time. Everyone's been sent their ballots out on time. How are things going so far?
Yeah, so far everything is going really well. A third of our registered voters, over 112,000 ballots, have been mailed out to people's homes, and we are seeing over a third of those voters have already returned their ballots. We have drop boxes across the city, so you don't have to put your ballot back in the mail. If you're here locally, you can take it to any Milwaukee Public Library to drop it off. And then since April, we really had a visual of what a poll worker shortage looks like. So the most important thing in order to have neighborhood-based voting is to have enough election workers at those polling places. And since April, we have recruited and trained over 2,500 new poll workers, and we have over 1,000 returning veteran poll workers who, now that we have all the proper safety protocols in place and have provided training and all the necessary PPE, feel more comfortable working on election day.
Can you go through, Claire, the dates and deadlines, early in-person voting when that ends, last day to turn in, last hour to turn in your absentee ballot, all that stuff?
Yeah, so right now the most upcoming deadline is voter registration by mail or online. Right now it's October 21st. It was extended by a week under a court ruling. The first day of early voting is October 20th. Early voting runs until the Sunday before the election, unless you need to register to vote. And then Friday, October 30th is your deadline. October 29th is the legal deadline to request a by mail ballot, but it doesn't realistically give a voter enough time to be assured that they will have time to receive their ballot and return it by election day. So we recommend that you apply at least a week in advance so that you have time to receive the ballot and then to either put it back in the mail or to use a drop box. And then the most important day is November 3rd, Election Day. It's really important for voters to know it's never too late to register and vote in Wisconsin. You can register and vote on Election Day. You would just need to bring proof of address if your ID doesn't have its current address on there. And you can, it's never too late to change your mind. If you're skeptical and you're not sure, just know that you can change your mind all the way until 8 p.m. on election night. And then the deadline to return your absentee ballot right now under the current court ruling is also Election Day. So right now that's a postmark deadline. It has to be postmarked by Election Day, or if you're using a drop box, it has to be physically in that drop box by 8 o'clock on election night. And then we have until November 9th for us to receive that postmarked ballot.
Absentee voting guidelines vary from community to community, so make sure you check with your city clerk on when and where you can vote early or drop off your ballot. And if you vote absentee, make sure you have a witness sign your envelope and provide their address. The Marquette Law School poll has been tracking voters' opinions on this presidential election, with the latest poll being released October 7th. Our Raul Galvan spoke to Dr. Charles Franklin, director of the poll.
Charles, I heard you quoted this morning as saying this, that the big news was that there was no change.
That seems to be the story of the year from a polling perspective. We've averaged about a 5-point Biden lead from last August till now across 12 different polls. We've had Trump up in 1 and a tie in February, but a small middle single digit lead for Biden is really the predominant thing. And if you look at it since May, it's been a 4-point, 6-point, 5-point, 4-point, and now 5-point Biden lead. 46 to 41 for Biden, with 4% for the Libertarian and about 8 or 9% undecided beyond that. But it's been stable, and I think part of this is the president's job approval numbers have shown less variability in the National Gallup poll since he took office than any president since Franklin Roosevelt, and not a little less, a lot less. Barack Obama had held the record for little variability, but Trump is well below what Obama had. And so this reflects partisan polarization. The opposite party gives the president 10% or less approval rating. That was true of Republicans and Obama. It's true of Democrats and Trump. While the president's party holds in the mid 70s to low 80s for Obama, mid 80s to 90 for Trump. That kind of polarization just means we don't see much change. The one other thing is, here in Wisconsin, about 33% say they strongly approve of the job Trump is doing as president. And between 45 and 48% from sample to sample strongly disapprove. So that's almost 80% of respondents who have these really strong pro or anti-Trump views. And it leaves barely 20% who might swing opinion and vote one way or another.
It's really going to come down to those 8% in Wisconsin, isn't it?
That and turnout, of course, is the other way that you shift things a little bit. When we look at that 8 to 10% that say they're undecided or might vote third party, some of those are actual Libertarian Party supporters, and they're expressing a sincere preference for the Libertarian candidate. But some of them are people who are not satisfied with either Trump or Biden.
There seems to be a positive outlook for the improvement of the economy.
Yeah, this is one of the economic issues that I think deserves attention, or at least you'd think we would hear more about it in the campaign. There's a big margin that say the economy is worse off now than it was a year ago, about almost 30 points. I think it's worse. But optimism about the future is really quite positive. More than 25% more people think we'll be better off in a year than think we'll be worse off. And, you would expect an incumbent administration to play to that issue. People do see Trump's handling of the economy fairly positively. 51% approve of the job he's doing on that. But couple that with the optimism about the future will be better, and that would be an element of a campaign. Of course, you have to deal with the fact that it's worse now than a year ago, and how did that come about and who's responsible for it? But there is some real optimism about the future here in the state.
Thank you, Charles.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Milwaukee Journal Sentinel Washington Bureau Chief Greg Gilbert has his ears to the ground in our nation's capital. He spoke with Portia Young before President Trump tested positive for COVID. He discussed winning scenarios in next month's election.
I do talk to some lawmakers, and I also, talk to strategists in both parties a lot. And you get a feel for kind of what the expectations are. And particularly when you talk to people either off the record or, on background, where they're likely to be maybe a little more candid. And I think Democrats in general are optimistic, but they're hedging their bets, and they're also chastened by what happened in 2016. So, I wouldn't say they're taking anything for granted. And there's always that little, worry in the back of their heads that, hey, we've been down this road before. I mean, Democrats in Wisconsin have done their share of losing. So, they're not, wildly optimistic, but they feel like they're in a good position. And they either see this race as it's going to go down to the wire, but we think we have a really good chance. Or some of them think they have a shot at winning by several points for president. On the Republican side, I think, you don't talk to too many Republicans in their heart of hearts who think that Donald Trump has a chance to win by 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 points. What they're hoping for is that he can eke out another narrow victory. And so the most optimistic Republicans are, this thing is going down to the wire, and we have a decent shot to do what we did 4 years ago. If everything falls into place, Donald Trump can eke out a victory with 47.5% of the vote, and that's good enough for us. There are Republicans who are less optimistic. And so, again, in their heart of hearts, there are Republicans who just think it's a huge lift because they're looking at the polling and they don't think Donald Trump has done a ton to broaden his base. And they're looking at the pandemic, and they're looking at how the things we've been talking about, how stable the numbers are, and the fact that Joe Biden isn't Hillary Clinton when it comes to her political liabilities. So again, there's a range of opinion in both parties, but collectively, the scenarios are, a jump ball, narrow Republican victory, narrow Democratic victory, or a more comfortable Democratic win. The scenario that I think you don't hear as much about is a comfortable Republican win.
And how are southeastern Wisconsin voters leaning? Scotty Myers and Alexandria Mack spoke to voters in Washington, Ozaukee, and Waukesha counties for a feature in our October 22nd Vote 2020. Here's an excerpt from that piece.
So I would say it's mostly Republican, yeah. There's a few Democrats here, but we all get along great and have a great time together.
I will be voting for the current president, President Trump.
And why will you be voting for President Trump?
Well, for me personally, there's a number of different issues, but I would say the number one would probably be law and order, making sure that certain organizations don't rule by mob. Rioting, everything else is, I think, completely uncalled for and not necessary.
I have voted Republican my whole life, and the minute Donald Trump was nominated, 4 years ago, was the minute I decided I was going to change that. So, I'm going to be voting for Biden.
What's the turnoff for you with President Trump?
I feel like I can't vote for someone if I wouldn't even let my kids watch them on TV.
There is a lot of Trump support. It's hard to be a good neighbor sometimes, and I work at it.
So why will you be voting for Joe Biden this election?
Because I believe he understands what terrible shape this country is in and what we need to make it better. We need health care for everybody. We need, there's so much we need. I'm sorry.
So I used to vote Republican quite a bit. And just more recently with some of the social issues that are going on in the world, I have a biracial family. And some of the views that Joe Biden supports resonates a little bit stronger with me right now in my life.
I think it's well known that it tends to lean, the WOW counties, Washington, Waukesha, Ozaukee, tend to lean more conservative Republican. I consider myself conservative, but I am still, for this election, feel strong and confident and comfortable about that I voted for Joe Biden.
And then people like I've mentioned, hey, I'm voting for Trump. They're like, how can you do that? How sick are you? You know, they go ballistic. Oh my God, that's horrible. You're a black man voting for Trump? Oh, he's so racist. And I'm just looking at these people going, no, you know, he's not. I believe that Donald Trump has turned around the economy in a fantastic way. I mean, we had probably the lowest unemployment rate that we've ever had, and especially for blacks and Hispanics.
And that about does it for the show. Remember to check with your local city clerk about your voting location options and to visit MilwaukeePBS.org for more voter information. Coming up on October 22nd and October 29th at 7:30 p.m. on our Milwaukee PBS Vote 2020 programs, hear from Margaret Hoover, host of Firing Line on PBS. She'll talk with our own Portia Young, host of 1036, about her choice for president, which may surprise you coming from the great-granddaughter of former President Herbert Hoover. We'll get her take on the Supreme Court nominee and her thoughts on the future of America, given the political and racial divides we're now facing. That's October 22nd and 29th here on Milwaukee PBS. On behalf of our PBS crew, I'm Earl Arms.